This is ABTV, Animal Bites Television. For animal lovers, by animal lovers.
Hey, Brian from SnakeBytes here. It's the Colubrid egg laying season. That means up to 1,000 eggs each and every day. We're gonna show you the entire process. You're watching SnakeBytes. It's the Colubrid egg laying season, which is certainly one of my favorite times of the year and the busiest as well. But I want to take a look at what is a colubrid snake. They're of the family Colubridae, which is of a Latin word named colubr, which means serpent or snake. They're an extremely variable animal comprising of over 300 genera and over 2,000 species, meaning that 2/3 of all species of snake in the entire world are colubrids. Now, think about it, guys. I may have worked with 200 species. If there's over 2,000, I still have a long way to go before I've even scratched the surface. Well, seeing as it's egg production season for us here at BHB, I want to take a look at how we got to this stage of the game. While most species of colubrid snakes are non-venomous, what one species is accounted for human fatalities? A, hognose, B, cat-eye snakes, or C, the boom slang? Go ahead and answer down below in the comments and check back later in the show to see if you have the right answer. Spotlight, we'll be highlighting Bush League breeders forums. Go ahead and check out the URL down below or click on the link in the description. Now, I've often said that breeding snakes is certainly not rocket science, but at the same time, it does require some skill and some knowledge to be successful. It's not like you can just throw two snakes together and harvest the eggs later in the summer. Now, oftentimes, successful colubrid breeding starts with something that's called brumation or hibernation, which is basically just a fancy way of saying you cool your animals down. Now, the best success with colubrids typically starts with that cooling, dormant period. It does two things. It actually creates something that's called spermatogenesis in males, which is basically just meaning that it has fertile sperm. And then with females, it actually aids in the follicle development. Now, we've spent a lot of time in the past talking about breeding snakes, so we're not going to talk that much about it here. After all, this show is about finding eggs, isn't it? So let's go on that hunt. So every morning is kind of like an Easter egg hunt here for me at BHB this time of the year. And we basically mark each female with a lay tag and a nest box is in with that girl. And we just kind of go through and check every day to see if there's eggs. Now, these girls are going to typically lay anywhere from 7 to 10 days after a shed, so it's pretty predictable. And we just basically go through each one of the cages and open them up until we find eggs. And guess what? Take a look at this, guys. This is actually it right here. This is reptilian gold. That's what I always say. That pearly white egg just gets me excited every single time. And take a look at this gorgeous little one here. This is actually an Arizona Mountain King. You did a good job, Mama. Go ahead and put her aside, and we're gonna process these eggs. But let's back up for 1 second, because once we find these eggs, we've got to obviously successfully incubate them. So let's go back and take a look at what we do here at BHB. So here they are, the start of the colubrid eggs. And here's these little pearly whites right here. Take a look at that. Now just imagine that all these boxes here have colubrid eggs in them. And most of these boxes have 2 clutches, anywhere from 6 or 8 eggs, all the way up to 20 or 25 eggs per clutch. So that's a lot of babies that are about to hatch. And this is only a few weeks of production. we still have a long way to go. But once we find those eggs, we're gonna incubate them right up here at about 82 degrees. And fortunately, we don't need a walk-in incubator because this area is climate controlled. I tell you, we'd need one big walk-in incubator if we were putting these guys in. But fortunately, Colubrid eggs are pretty tough. And even a degree or two either way isn't gonna really matter. But we use a medium called Vermiculite, and we moisten it up. There's actually a few other options, but I want to show you how we do it here at BHB. So there's a few options when it comes to incubation medium. We happen to use a product called Vermiculite. It's actually really good for egg production. It holds moisture really well. Now, if there's a downside, is that it's actually moist to the touch. Now, perlite is another option, which is actually not nearly as absorbent. And the whole idea is that the water will stay at the bottom of the box and the eggs will actually stay dry, which is fantastic. And then lastly, a product I use on all my pythons and leopard geckos is called Hatchite, which is a type of perlite that has a water isomer mixed right in with it, which is really great. But I've always used Vermiculite for colubrids. It's really the most economic way when you're producing lots of animals, to be honest with you. But you want a good water to Vermiculite ratio. Again, the idea is that in that incubation box, you want it to be above 90% humidity, really in the upper 90% range. So you need a lot of humidity. Now, the whole idea would really be a 1-to-1 ratio, water to weight ratio on Vermiculite. But of course, when you're doing a whole 5-gallon bucket like I am, I just kind of do it by feel. It's kind of that baker's thing. You know, I've been doing it for so long that I just know. So I pour some water in here and I just kind of mix it around till it feels like the right consistency. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a trick. If you try this and you don't want to do the weight to water ratio, basically you want the Vermiculite to be wet. You want it to clump up like this, like a ball, but when you squeeze it, there should be no drops of water coming out. So that is the exact consistency you want. Now, basically, I just put about 1.5 inches in the bottom of this tub. Now, my incubator boxes don't have any holes whatsoever, and we actually will open them up usually about once a week just to recirculate that oxygen, keeping in mind these little baby eggs are breathing, they're respirating, and if you don't change the oxygen, they could actually suffocate. But that's just about it. Now I gotta fill a whole lot of boxes right now. So now that we have our egg boxes all set, we're gonna come back to Mama Arizona Mountain King and go ahead and process her eggs. You can kind of see she's already forgotten about the eggs, in all honesty. You gotta remember that the vast majority of all snakes don't have any maternal instinct whatsoever. Now, there are some exceptions. Believe it or not, even in the colubrid world, beauty snakes have sometimes been noticed to protect their nest of eggs. But most animals, once they lay them, they don't care anymore. So basically, all I'm gonna do is check to see how many eggs I've got here, and there's 3 beautiful pearly white ones. Now, Arizona Mountain Kings, or what we call pyros, are actually pretty small egg producers. The majority of our colubrids lay 10+ eggs, sometimes even into the mid-20s, but these guys lay really small clutches. 6 eggs is a huge clutch typically for an Arizona Mountain King, and unfortunately they don't double clutch, so that's all you get each year. Hence the reason why you don't see a lot of them out there. Now, I have all of these racks actually numbered and lettered, so I know where it is. I'm gonna mark that data down because it's really important that when this clutch hatches, I know exactly where they came from. That way, if a surprise pops up and, hey, let's say a leucistic Arizona Mountain King pops up, I know exactly what bred it. So that's really important. This girl happens to be in aisle D all the way down in cage 8. So she's D8. And all I'm gonna do is basically say D8, female, Arizona Mountain King, and I'm gonna mark the fact that she was bred to an albino male. And then I'm gonna just put how many eggs. In this case, there was 3 eggs, no slugs, and of course, the date. I'm gonna mark that on the cage as well as on this box, so I have triple redundancy, so they always know exactly what clutch this is from. Even if something gets rubbed off or someone spills something on it, I can always go back and know exactly what's going on. Let's just keep moving on, guys. It's gonna be a long day. So basically, it's just a matter of checking each and every snake that has a lay tag or a nest box in with it. And what you have to kind of remember here is that we've been working all year just for this opportunity to see a good clutch of eggs. In a lot of cases, and here we go, another clutch. Now these are really cool. These are albino Nelson's milk snakes. Look at how gorgeous that is. I always call these the candy cane of the snake world because they look like you just hang them on a Christmas tree and eat them up or something like that. Probably don't taste that good. But here's a really beautiful clutch of eggs. Now what's really interesting about albino Nelson's milk snakes is that when they first came out, they were $2,000 a piece. A guy named Doug Moody actually produced the very first ones of them, and it was all the rage in the entire reptile community. Everyone was talking about them, and that's when I bought into them, was that first couple years when they were still really big money. And don't get me wrong, don't feel bad for me that they're only, you know, 60 to 100 bucks right now, because we made our money back when they were still $1,000 or $1,500. But again, you always talk about, it's never really about the money, is it? You know, it's about producing something that's just absolutely awesome. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 eggs. That's pretty good for a Nelson's milk snake. Typically they'll have anywhere from 4 to 10 eggs. You know, occasionally you'll get really lucky and have a clutch of 12 or 13. Now these guys will double clutch, which makes it really good. And again, like I was saying, they become pretty affordable now, usually under 100 bucks. Now that is one gorgeous snake for that price point. And again, we're just gonna process these eggs, make sure they're set. Now again, 60 days is how long it's gonna take for these guys to hatch, and it's pretty exciting to think that we've been working on that clutch of eggs for months now, and here is the fruits of our labor. All right, another beautiful clutch of eggs, and just take a look at how gorgeous that albino Nelson is, just tons of red. Now this is a pretty good clutch from this girl here. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 eggs, which is another really beautiful clutch. But this is a good thing for me to try to teach you guys. Do you notice how so many of these clutches, look at, they're like one big clump of eggs, and you might ask yourself, why do these snake eggs always adhere together? And you guys would see this if you follow me on Instagram or Twitter. I'm always posting pictures of ball pythons around eggs or colubrid eggs, and almost all the time they're clumped together. Well, that's Mother Nature's way of making sure that these eggs survive to become little babies. Now what you have to remember is that that embryo adheres to the top of the egg, and if you don't have that egg in the right position, that air bubble is going to flip and they're going to drown the babies. Well, when they're stuck together, there's a lot less chance of that egg rolling around, right? That's a perfect way to make sure that these eggs stay in the exact same position that they're laid all the way through until they hatch. Whew, look at that. A lot of albino Nelson eggs today, which is really cool. But hey, you know what? This is a great learning opportunity here. I just talked about eggs clumping together like this. Well, look at some of these rogue eggs right here. They're just kind of out there, not clumped together. Now, what that tells me is that maybe the embryo is attached to the top, or maybe she rolled them around when she was spreading around. Now, I've showed you guys how to candle eggs before. I want to go over it again with you to make sure that these eggs hatch. Just give them the absolute best possible chance. But we have to go to a dark room in order to do that. So let's go. I always come out just into a dark hallway when I want to check for eggs. It doesn't have to be pitch black by any stretch. You just want to get into an area that is dark enough where a flashlight can illuminate an egg. And I just use one of these little pointer lights here. It works fantastic because a real good stream of light illuminates that egg. I'll start with this clump of eggs right here that are together, and as soon as I put the light on it, bam, that embryo just pops out on every single one of them. Again, Mother Nature's way of making sure those eggs are good. Now this egg here, you can see was just barely rotated, so I just have to give it about a quarter turn, which means she did roll it a little bit. To be honest with you, probably would have still hatched. And this egg too, about the same, about a quarter turn. So actually the mom did pretty good and she didn't mess me up too bad. But now I can be assured that these eggs are really in the right position and have the best chance of hatching. This girl was marked laying yesterday, which basically means when we checked, she wasn't done. So I absolutely know there's going to be a clutch of eggs in here. And it's a goini, which means that they're pretty typically big clutches. And you know what? This is actually pretty interesting here, guys, because look at this. They're nice, beautiful eggs. There's a couple slugs here, and I'll talk more about slugs in a little bit, but those are just basically infertile eggs. Now what I always want to do is get those infertile eggs off of the fertile eggs, because you know it's just not going to help them whatsoever to have rotting eggs next to them. And I just want to make sure that all the other eggs are good. But what I wanted to show you is something that I absolutely hate when snakes do. They lay these like crazy goopy eggs. If you leave this on the eggs, it absolutely will cause good eggs to go bad. So you have to slowly peel this nasty goopiness. Oh, just dripping all over the place. It's so disgusting. But you gotta get it off of the good eggs. And you can see right here the residue that's on those good eggs. That's gotta come off, guys, because again, if you don't get that off, that egg is gonna go bad, guaranteed. So you know what? Let's go to the sink and I'll show you what I do. It seems the only way to save those eggs. I tell you what else, guys, this stuff absolutely stinks like a rotten egg. It's really quite disgusting. It's kind of all over my fingers now from wiping it off. And again, it's really important to get this off. Now, typically you never want to get your eggs wet because wetness is not something that's good for a snake egg whatsoever. But in this case, it's the better of two evils. So I just take a damp paper towel and I just slowly wipe off all that gook. Now, every now and then it gets so bad on an egg that, believe it or not, I'll even dunk the egg in water itself. But today it's coming off pretty good here. You can see the vast majority. I'm trying to get right down into the cracks and crevices too, because just any of that nasty goop is gonna cause eggs to go bad. Whew, I tell you, it's so nasty how it smells. It's unbelievable. It's just a little small egg. I don't know how all that smell comes out of it, but I tell you, this might be a good way to lose some more weight, huh, guys? So there it is. I mean, it's pretty much all cleaned up now. They look pretty good, so back to the incubator box and we'll count them. Get going. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16, 18, 20. Not bad, 20 eggs. There's actually 5 slugs too. Now we do keep track of good and bad eggs because I always want to know what each female does. Now if I start to see a trend where a female's always laying 10 or 15% infertile eggs, I can kind of tag her and try to figure out is it the male or the female, but again, we'll talk more about that later. The thing I love about Cal Kings is that their eggs are absolutely enormous. Look at the size of this female right here. She's not like any beast by any stretch of the imagination. And by a matter of fact, she's a mosaic cow, which is a really cool mutation. But just take a look at the size of those eggs. It is so hard to believe that some of these snakes can lay such monster eggs. But the thing that's great about that is that when the babies hatch, whew, they hatch out really big. They do great right off of the rip, so you don't have to worry about feeding or anything like that. And I tell you, Cal Kings come out with quite a little feisty attitude too, which makes them super, super cool. But again, a Cal King's gonna lay typically anywhere from 6 eggs all the way up to 10 or 12 eggs. It's pretty rare to get a clutch of over 12 eggs when it comes to Cal Kings. Although I'll be honest with you, I had a clutch a couple days ago that was 18 eggs. I think it was the largest Cal King clutch that I've ever had. This girl, 2, 4, 5 eggs in 1 slug. Pretty typical for a Cal King. No matter how many clutches of eggs I've pulled over the last 25 years, there's still nothing like that feeling of flipping the lid and seeing a clutch of eggs. I've often said that the time that I don't get excited about producing my least expensive snake will be when I'll stop breeding snakes. I just absolutely love them to death. And this clutch is a good example of something I want to talk about really quick. It's one of those mixed clutches. There's fertile eggs and there's infertile eggs in this clutch. Now this happens to be a scaleless or a het scaleless corn snake. It's got 2, 4, 6 beautifully pearly white eggs, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 infertile eggs. I've showed this before, but I really want to show you guys the difference between a fertile and an infertile egg. I mean, look at the difference. It doesn't take an expert to see that this egg just doesn't look quite right. This is nice and white, it's rounded, it looks like a chicken egg almost, but just smaller, whereas this looks more like a jelly bean, right? This egg is no good. Now, the whole reason for infertile eggs can really be twofold, in all honesty. It can be a male sperm issue. For some reason, he could just run out of fertile sperm. Maybe he got too hot on the hot spot of the cage, or maybe he's just not a good male. And sometimes it can actually be a female issue. That's why I was telling you that we keep track of every egg a female lays. If we start to see that that male was bred to 5 females, and 4 of the 5 females lay beautiful clutches of eggs, but that one female consistently lays bad bad eggs, we know that there's something wrong with her. Now you might ask, what could be wrong with her? Honestly, it could be, fat around the ovaries. She could just have a complete reproductive issue where she'll never be good. And oftentimes when we have that happen, where there's an animal that 2 or 3 years in a row has laid bad eggs, we typically just give her away as a pet or sell her real cheap as a pet and make sure that no one ever breeds her again. But, the best way to avoid infertile eggs is don't spread your males too thin. Make sure that he gets cool enough during the cool down period. And usually you don't have a lot of infertile eggs. All right, this is a beautiful clutch of eggs. But if you notice right here, let me get this girl out of here. Come on, you little bugger. There you go. Good job, Mama. You notice that the sphagnum moss is what the bedding we use as a nesting bedding is typically supposed to be really nice and damp. This one dried out a little bit, which happens from time to time. Not to mention she pushed it all the way and laid her clutch. Now, what happened is that the eggs dried out a little bit. You can see right here how they're just a little bit dimpled in. Now, this isn't anything to really be that concerned with, but we definitely want to make sure that those eggs pop out again and rehydrate. Well, there's kind of a simple way of doing it. You can either take some of that sphagnum moss, just like I just had, or you can take some paper towel as well. And I typically prefer to do paper towel. And all I do is just dampen that paper towel up just a little bit, not a lot. You don't want it to be like dripping wet, just where it's damp. And what I'll do is I'll just lay that right over those eggs like that. And again, the eggs can still breathe because it's a paper towel. It's, you can breathe right through it, but it stays nice and moist. I'll come back 2 or 3 days later and check. And if they're popped out, I just go ahead and remove the paper towel. It's a great way to save some eggs, because if you don't do that, even with that 100% or 95% humidity, a lot of times the eggs will continue to shrivel and you'll lose eggs. So trust me, it's a great technique to save some clutches of eggs. I always tell people that to be successful with snake breeding, and probably most things in life really, it's about doing the mundane things, It's always really cool when you see someone post a picture on Facebook or it's posted on a forum somewhere of this really cool mutation they just hatched out, or their triumphant success. But the truth is this is what makes you successful. Showing up every day and pooling eggs, it's feeding snakes, it's doing the things that you're not going to get an award or a like on Facebook for. You basically just have to come in and do your job. And that's really what makes you successful in this business. I can honestly say, it's the days where I can just spend with animals that is the best days for sure. Oftentimes, it's just the little things are the difference between having a successful clutch of eggs or having a slug clutch of eggs. Sunday afternoon, you're sitting around the house, you're tired, you don't want to go through all the problems of going into the shop and switching males, or you don't want to do that little extra thing. But the truth is, that's the difference between success and failure. And you got to remember that these animals need everything that we can possibly give them. And again, I think that's why a lot of people just aren't as successful at breeding snakes, quite frankly, is because they're not willing to sacrifice. I've spent my entire life surrounded by these animals, and it's so much dedication, it's almost impossible to even express to people how you have to live it every minute of every day. And that's why, quite frankly, I think that the people that do it just for the money really never are that successful, because quite frankly, sometimes it's not worth the money. I mean, you have to live every second of every day, and you have to have such an immense amount of passion for the animals that even when you don't want to work, you still go in because you know you have to. And I tell you, there's nothing more rewarding though than seeing the fruits of our labor finally paying off and seeing these beautiful eggs, knowing that in a short period of time, we're going to be hatching some really cool baby snakes. I showed you guys a few weeks ago that sometimes the breeding can cause egg binding. Well, this hypo-diffuse corn, sure enough, has an egg stuck right down by her vent. And as you can see, it's relatively close to the vent. Every now and then, I'll actually use a probe to help feel for the egg so I can guide it right through the anal passage. But fortunately, with just a little bit of pressure, I can already see that the egg is right there. So I'm going to gently massage this egg. Again, I'm going to be extremely gentle as to where not to hurt the animal. But if I left this egg in there and it started to get attached to the oviduct, it could kill the snake. Thankfully, we got this one's egg out and the animal is going to be completely fine. Well, that's another day down of collecting snake eggs. I think you guys get the idea of why I love this time of year so much. And hey, if all goes well, in a couple months, we'll be hatching these kids out. And that is even a better experience. You have no doubt I'll be doing some shows about that. While most species of colubrid snakes are non-venomous, which one species has accounted for human fatalities? If you said C, boomslang, you're 100% correct. Good job. So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. It certainly is an exciting time of the year with all of those eggs, and you can just imagine the babies that are about to hatch. And as always, I'm Facebooking and tweeting my way through it, so make sure to follow me over at SnakeBytesTV. Until next week, you've been watching Snake Bites.
What we have here is a magnificent specimen of a lace monitor. Now the lace monitor is endemic to the east coast of Australia. You find these guys in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and down across into South Australia.
This is ABTV,